The stagecoach rattled to a halt, dust billowing around it like a shroud as Katherine Rowland clutched her small valise tighter against her chest. Her heart pounded with anticipation as she gazed through the window at the small town of Promise Creek, Wyoming. After 2 months of correspondence and a grueling journey from Boston, she was finally here to meet her future husband, a cattle rancher named Thomas Wells. "End of the line, madam," the driver called, opening the door and offering his hand. Katherine stepped down, her green traveling dress already coated with a fine layer of dust. The year was 1878, and the West was still wild, still untamed. She had left behind everything familiar: her position as a schoolteacher, the cramped boarding house where she'd lived since her parents' deaths, and the crushing loneliness that had driven her to answer the advertisement in the matrimonial news. "Is there someone to meet you?" the driver asked, handing down her trunk. "Yes, my fiancé," Katherine replied, scanning the faces of the few people milling about the station. "Mr. Thomas Wells." The driver's expression changed subtly. "Wells, you say, from the Double W Ranch?" "Yes, that's right. Do you know him?" The driver exchanged glances with the station manager who had wandered over. The manager removed his hat, revealing a balding head that glistened with sweat despite the autumn chill. "Madam, I think you'd best come inside for a moment," the station manager said softly. Katherine followed him into the small station house, her stomach tightening with dread. 20 minutes later she emerged, her face pale, her eyes dry but vacant. Thomas Wells was dead, thrown from his horse 3 days prior while checking his fences. The funeral had been yesterday. She stood on the platform, her mind racing. No money to return east, no position waiting for her, no family to write to for help. The station manager had kindly offered her a place to stay for the night, but after that she was on her own. As she contemplated her dire circumstances, a tall figure approached from the hitching post across the street. He moved with the easy confidence of a man at home in the saddle, though he was currently on foot. His dark hat-shaded eyes the color of a summer sky, and a neatly trimmed beard framed a face weathered by sun and wind. "Miss Rowland?" he asked, stopping a respectful distance away. Katherine nodded, wondering how he knew her name. "I'm Quinn Yates. I was Tom's neighbor." "I heard you might be arriving today." His voice was deep and gentle. "I'm awful sorry about Tom." "Thank you, Mr. Yates. I never even met him." The absurdity of mourning a man she knew only through letters suddenly struck her, and she blinked back unexpected tears. Tom was a good man. "He spoke highly of you in his letters." Quinn Yates shifted uncomfortably. "Do you have somewhere to go, Miss Rowland?" The station manager offered me lodging for tonight. After that, she trailed off, unwilling to voice her uncertainty. Quinn Yates looked at her thoughtfully. He removed his hat, revealing thick dark hair with a touch of silver at the temples. "Miss Rowland, I don't mean to be forward, but my ranch is on the way back to what would have been your home. If you'd like, I could take you to see Tom's place. You came all this way, after all, and after that." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Then you'll ride home with me, just until you figure things out." Katherine stared at him, taken aback by the offer. She had no reason to trust this stranger, yet she sensed no danger from him, only genuine concern. "Why would you do that, Mr. Yates?" "You don't know me. Tom was my friend. He'd want someone looking after you." Quinn Yates replaced his hat. "Besides, my sister Martha lives with me. You'd have a proper chaperone and she could use the company." Katherine hesitated. The alternative was staying in town with no money and no prospects, possibly ending up in circumstances far worse than accepting the hospitality of her deceased fiancé's neighbor. "That's very kind of you, Mr. Yates," she said finally. "If you're certain it wouldn't be an imposition." "No imposition at all," he smiled, and the warmth of it reached his eyes. "We'll leave in the morning if that suits you. Get some rest tonight, Miss Rowland. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." Katherine watched him walk away, her mind reeling from how quickly her circumstances had changed. She had come west to marry a stranger. Now that stranger was dead, and another stranger was offering her sanctuary. It wasn't at all what she had planned, but perhaps, she thought as she gathered her belongings, it was the mercy she needed. The next morning dawned clear and crisp. Katherine had spent a restless night at the station manager's home, his wife fussing over her as if she were a widow rather than merely a bride who had arrived too late. She dressed in her best traveling outfit, a navy blue dress with a matching jacket, and pinned her auburn hair up beneath a modest hat. Quinn Yates arrived promptly at 8, driving a wagon rather than riding horseback. He tipped his hat to her as she emerged from the house. "Morning, Miss Rowland. I hope you slept well." "As well as could be expected, thank you." She allowed him to help her into the wagon, noticing the strength in his hands as he lifted her effortlessly. "I've loaded your trunk in the back," he said, climbing up beside her. It's about 3 hours to Tom's place. The journey was mostly silent. Katherine was still processing her situation, and Quinn Yates seemed content to leave her to her thoughts. Occasionally, he would point out landmarks or mention something about the area, but he didn't press her to converse. "Tom's ranch isn't as big as some," he said as they crested a hill. "But it's good land. He worked hard on it." "How long did you know him?" Katherine asked. "About 5 years. He came out here from Kansas, bought the land, and started building it up. He was a determined man, lonely though." "Is that why he advertised for a wife?" Quinn nodded. "Out here, a man needs a partner, someone to share the work, the joys, the sorrows." He glanced at her. "What made you answer his advertisement?" Katherine looked out at the vast, open landscape. "I was a schoolteacher in Boston. My parents died 3 years ago. I had no family, few friends, and little prospect of marriage. When I saw Mr. Wells' advertisement, it seemed practical." "Practical," Quinn repeated, a hint of a smile in his voice. "That's a very Eastern way of looking at it." Was that wrong? Katherine asked, suddenly self-conscious. "No, not wrong. Just different from how we see things out here. In the West, practical and passionate aren't mutually exclusive." Katherine wasn't sure how to respond to that, so she remained silent as they continued their journey. Finally, they turned down a long drive toward a modest but well-maintained ranch house. A small barn stood nearby, along with a corral and a chicken coop. It was nothing grand, but it was tidy and solid, much like the man she had imagined Thomas Wells to be. "This is it," Quinn said softly. "Would you like to go in?" Katherine nodded, her throat tight. Quinn helped her down from the wagon and escorted her to the door. He produced a key given to him by the lawyer. He explained and unlocked it. The house was simple. A main room with a stone fireplace, a small kitchen, and 2 bedrooms off to the side. It was clean but sparse, with few personal touches. On the mantel, however, sat a daguerreotype of a stern-faced man with kind eyes. "Is this?" Katherine asked, picking it up. "Yes, that's Tom, taken about a year ago for some legal paperwork." She studied the face of the man she had agreed to marry, searching for some connection, some sense of loss, but there was nothing. He was a stranger whose letters she had read, nothing more. "He seemed like a good man," she said finally, replacing the picture. "He was." Quinn watched her carefully. "Would you like some time alone here?" "No, I don't think that's necessary." She looked around one last time. "This could have been my home." "It still could be," Quinn said quietly. "The lawyer's holding the deed until they figure out if Tom had any family back east who might claim it. But Tom mentioned in town that he was leaving everything to his new wife. If you have those letters." Katherine shook her head. "I couldn't possibly. I never married him." "I have no right to his property." Quinn didn't argue. He simply nodded and held the door for her as they left. As they returned to the wagon, Katherine took one last look at what might have been her future. "Ready to go?" Quinn asked gently. "Yes," she said, suddenly certain. "I'm ready." The Yates Ranch was larger than Thomas Wells' property, with more cattle grazing on the surrounding pastures. The main house was a 2-story structure built of sturdy logs with a wide porch that wrapped around the front. As they approached, a woman emerged from the house, shading her eyes against the afternoon sun. "That's Martha," Quinn said, waving to his sister. "She's been running the house since our parents passed. She'll be glad for another woman's company." Martha Yates was a tall, handsome woman in her early 30s with the same striking blue eyes as her brother. Her brown hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and her calico dress was clean but worn. "You must be Miss Rowland," Martha said, coming forward to greet them. "Quinn told me what happened. I'm so sorry about Mr. Wells." "Thank you," Katherine replied, taking an immediate liking to the forthright woman. "And thank you for opening your home to me." "Nonsense," Martha said briskly. "We're neighbors out here and neighbors help each other." "Come inside, you must be exhausted. I've prepared the guest room for you." The guest room was small but comfortable, with a patchwork quilt on the bed and curtains that Martha had clearly made herself. After washing away the dust of the journey, Katherine joined the Yates siblings for a simple but delicious supper of beef stew, fresh bread, and apple pie. "Quinn tells me you were a schoolteacher back east," Martha said as they ate. "Yes, for 5 years. I taught children aged 6 to 12. "We could use a teacher here," Martha remarked. "The nearest school is in town, too far for the younger children to travel daily. Some families hire tutors, but most children just get whatever education their parents can provide." Katherine felt a spark of interest. "Are there many children in the area?" "Enough to fill a small schoolhouse," Quinn said. "We've been talking about building one for years, but finding a teacher willing to come this far west has been the challenge." "I would be willing," Katherine said, surprising herself with the offer. "That is, if you think the community would accept me." Quinn and Martha exchanged glances. "It would be a start," Martha said cautiously. "At least until you decide what you want to do long term." That night, as Katherine lay in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the strange sounds of the prairie night, she contemplated her situation. She had come west expecting to be a wife. Now she found herself alone, dependent on the kindness of strangers. Yet somehow the panic she expected to feel hadn't materialized. Instead, she felt an odd sense of possibility, as if the path before her, though unclear, might lead somewhere worthwhile. Over the next few days, Katherine settled into a routine at the Yates Ranch. Martha welcomed her help with household chores, and Katherine found the physical work oddly satisfying after years of teaching. She learned to make soap from lye and rendered fat, to churn butter, and to prepare meals on the massive iron stove that dominated the kitchen. Quinn was often out with his ranch hands, but he made a point of joining them for meals, his presence filling the room in a way that Katherine found both unsettling and comforting. He never intruded on her privacy or made her feel unwelcome. If anything, he seemed to go out of his way to ensure her comfort. A week after her arrival, Quinn approached her as she was hanging laundry in the yard. "I'm riding into town tomorrow," he said. "I thought you might like to come along. You could speak to some of the families about teaching their children." "I would like that," Katherine replied, shielding her eyes from the sun as she looked up at him. "Thank you." The next day, they rode into Promise Creek together. The small town looked different in the morning light, more welcoming than it had on the day of her arrival. Quinn introduced her to several merchants and ranchers, explaining her background and her interest in teaching. "We've needed a teacher for some time," said Mrs. Peterson, the wife of the general store owner. "Our Lily is 9 and bright as a button, but she's falling behind without proper schooling." By midday, Katherine had met with 5 families, all enthusiastic about the prospect of a school. The local carpenter, Mr. Dawson, offered to donate lumber for a schoolhouse if others would provide the labor. "Seems like you've started something," Quinn said as they ate lunch at the small cafe in town. "People have been talking about a school for years, but you've got them actually planning to build one." "It gives me purpose," Katherine admitted. "I was adrift when I arrived, but teaching, it's something I know I can do well." Quinn studied her for a moment, his blue eyes thoughtful. "You're a remarkable woman, Katherine Rowland. Most women in your position would have been desperate to return east. Perhaps I would have been if I had anything to return to." She met his gaze steadily. "But I came west for a new beginning. The circumstances have changed, but the opportunity remains." As they prepared to leave town, Quinn stopped at the lawyer's office to inquire about Thomas Wells' property. The lawyer, a balding man named Mr. Finch, greeted them cordially. "I was planning to send word out to the ranch," Mr. Finch said. "I've received confirmation that Mr. Wells had no living relatives. According to his will, which he updated shortly before his accident, his property goes to his intended bride, Miss Katherine Rowland of Boston, Massachusetts, should she arrive as planned." Katherine gasped. "But we never married." "That doesn't matter," Mr. Finch explained. "He specifically mentioned you by name. The property is legally yours, Miss Rowland, if you want it." Katherine looked at Quinn, who remained expressionless. "I don't know what to say," she murmured. "You don't have to decide now," Quinn said. "It's a lot to consider." On the ride back to the ranch, Katherine was quiet, her mind racing. She now owned a piece of land, a home of her own. It wasn't a fortune, but it was independence, something she had never truly had before. "What will you do?" Quinn asked finally, breaking the silence. "I'm not sure. It seems wrong somehow, taking his property when I never even met him. He wanted you to have it. He was preparing it for you, for the life you would have together." Katherine glanced at Quinn, trying to read his expression. "What would you do if you were in my position? I can't say. But I think Tom would want his land to be used, not left empty." That evening, Katherine sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the prairie in shades of gold and crimson. Martha joined her, bringing 2 cups of tea. "Quinn told me about Mr. Wells' property," Martha said, settling into a chair beside Katherine. "It's quite a turn of events." "Yes, it is. I'm not sure what to do." "You could stay here as long as you need to figure it out," Martha offered. "We enjoy having you." "That's very kind," Katherine said, sipping her tea, "but I can't impose indefinitely. It's no imposition, especially for Quinn." Martha gave her a meaningful look. "He's been different since you arrived, more like his old self." "What do you mean?" Martha sighed. "Quinn was engaged once, about 3 years ago. A girl from back east, like you. She came out to marry him, took one look at this place, and decided she couldn't bear the isolation. She left on the next stage. How terrible for him," Katherine murmured. "It nearly broke him. He threw himself into the ranch, worked from dawn till dusk, barely spoke to anyone for months." Martha patted Katherine's hand. "But since you've been here, I've seen glimpses of the old Quinn, the one who used to laugh and tease and dream." Katherine felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with sympathy. She had noticed Quinn's attention, his quiet consideration, but had attributed it to neighborly kindness. Now she wondered if there might be something more. "I'm not looking to replace Thomas Wells in my affections," Katherine said carefully. "I came here to be his wife, but I didn't love him. I barely knew him." "No one's suggesting you did," Martha assured her. "But life out here moves at its own pace. Connections form quickly when they're genuine." Katherine pondered Martha's words as the darkness settled around them. In the distance, a coyote howled, its lonely cry echoing across the prairie. She had come west seeking security and companionship. Perhaps those things were still within her reach, just not in the way she had expected. The following week was a whirlwind of activity. The community had embraced the idea of a school, and work on the schoolhouse began in earnest. Men from several ranches gathered to raise the frame, while the women organized a quilting bee to make blankets for the winter months ahead. Katherine found herself at the center of it all, offering suggestions on the schoolhouse design and making lists of needed supplies. Quinn was often by her side, offering his support and occasionally his opinion. They had fallen into an easy companionship, riding together to supervise the construction and discussing plans for the school's curriculum. "You've brought this community together," Quinn remarked one afternoon as they watched the men work on the roof. "People who barely spoke to each other are now planning harvest festivals and Christmas pageants." "It wasn't me," Katherine demurred. "They were ready for something like this. I just happened to arrive at the right time." "Don't underestimate your impact, Katherine." He rarely used her first name, and the sound of it in his deep voice sent a pleasant shiver through her. "You've changed things here, changed people." "Have I changed you, Quinn?" she asked boldly, surprising herself with the question. He turned to look at her, his blue eyes serious. Yes, he said simply. You have. Before she could respond, one of the workers called for Quinn's assistance with a stubborn beam. He excused himself, leaving Katherine to ponder his words. That evening, as they rode back to the ranch, they took a detour past Thomas Wells' property, her property now, though she still thought of it as his. The small house stood silent in the gathering dusk, a monument to what might have been. I've been thinking, Katherine said as they paused at the gate. This house is closer to where the schoolhouse is being built. It would make sense for me to live here once I begin teaching. Quinn was quiet for a moment. Is that what you want? It's practical, she said, echoing their earlier conversation, and it would free up your guest room. You're welcome in our home for as long as you wish to stay, Katherine. His voice was carefully neutral. But if you prefer your independence, I understand. It's not about preference, she said, frustrated by his reserve. It's about not imposing on your hospitality indefinitely. Is that all it is? He turned in his saddle to face her, his expression unreadable in the fading light. What else would it be? She challenged. Quinn sighed. Nothing, I suppose. If you've made up your mind, I'll help you move your things whenever you're ready. They rode back to the ranch in silence, a new tension stretching between them. Katherine regretted her decision almost immediately, but pride prevented her from retracting it. She had come west to be independent, after all. This was her opportunity to prove she could stand on her own. 2 days later, Quinn and 2 of his ranch hands helped move Katherine's belongings to Thomas Wells' house. Martha had packed a basket of food supplies and household necessities, and the women from the Quilting Bee had contributed curtains and linens to make the place more homely. Are you sure about this? Martha asked as they arranged Katherine's few personal items in the bedroom. It's awfully isolated out here for a woman alone. Your brother's ranch is just over that ridge, Katherine pointed out, and once the school opens, I'll have daily contact with the community. Still, it's not the same as having someone in the house with you. Martha looked worried. Winter's coming and storms can leave you stranded for days. I'll be fine, Katherine insisted, though her confidence was beginning to waver. The house suddenly seemed very empty, very quiet. When it was time for Quinn and Martha to leave, Katherine walked them to the door, fighting an unexpected urge to ask them to stay. Thank you both for everything, she said sincerely. I don't know what would have become of me without your kindness. You'd have managed, Quinn said with a small smile. You're stronger than you realize, Katherine. Nevertheless, I'm grateful. She hesitated, then added, I hope you'll visit sometimes. Of course we will, Martha assured her, giving her a warm hug. And you must come to Sunday dinners at our place. It's a tradition. Quinn merely nodded, his eyes lingering on her face for a moment before he turned away. As she watched them ride off, Katherine felt a curious emptiness that had nothing to do with being alone in a strange house. That night, as she lay in Thomas Wells' bed, her bed now Katherine found sleep elusive. The house creaked and settled in unfamiliar ways, and every sound from outside seemed magnified in the darkness. She thought of Quinn, of his quiet strength and unexpected gentleness. She thought of how his rare smiles transformed his face, and how his eyes seemed to see more of her than anyone ever had. This is ridiculous, she muttered to herself, punching her pillow into shape. He's been kind to you because of Thomas, nothing more. But Martha's words echoed in her mind. He's been different since you arrived, more like his old self. Was it possible that Quinn felt the same inexplicable connection that she did? And if so, what did that mean for her plans, her newfound independence? The next morning, Katherine rose early, determined to make the house her own. She swept and dusted, rearranged furniture, and baked bread in the small stove. By midday, the place felt more welcoming, though still not quite like home. A knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. She opened it to find Quinn standing there, hat in hand. I was checking fences nearby, he explained. Thought I'd see how you're settling in. That's kind of you, she said, stepping back to let him enter. I'm managing well enough. Quinn looked around, noting the changes she'd made. "It suits you," he said. "You've made it your own already." "Not entirely. I still feel like a guest in someone else's home." She poured him a cup of coffee and sat across from him at the small table. "But I suppose that will change with time." "It will." He sipped his coffee, studying her over the rim of the cup. "You look tired." "I didn't sleep well," she admitted. "Too many new sounds." "That's natural. It takes time to get used to a new place." They fell into conversation about the schoolhouse, which was nearly complete, and the dozen or so children who would be attending. Catherine's enthusiasm grew as she described her plans for the curriculum and the books she had ordered from back east. "You were born to teach," Quinn observed. "Your whole face lights up when you talk about it." Katherine blushed at the compliment. "It's the one thing I've always been certain of. Even when I agreed to come west and marry Thomas, I hoped to continue teaching in some capacity." "Tom would have supported that," Quinn said. "He valued education, though he had little formal schooling himself." "Tell me more about him," Katherine requested. "I feel I should know the man whose home I'm living in." Quinn's expression softened as he spoke of his friend Thomas's determination to build something from nothing, his quiet humor, his fairness with his workers. Katherine listened, trying to reconcile this man with the formal letters she had received. "He would have been a good husband," Quinn concluded. "Steady, reliable, those are admirable qualities," Katherine said, "but I'm beginning to think it takes more than that to build a life together." "What else does it take?" Quinn asked, his eyes intent on her face. "Understanding." "Companionship, a shared vision of the future," she paused, "and perhaps something less definable, a connection that goes beyond practical considerations." "Is that what you're looking for now?" His voice was low, almost hesitant. Katherine met his gaze directly. "I didn't come west looking for love, Quinn. I came looking for security, for purpose. But now that I'm here." She trailed off, uncertain how to express the feelings that had been growing within her. "Now that you're here," he prompted. "Now that I'm here, I find myself wanting more than I expected." She stood abruptly, moving to the window to hide the emotion on her face. "But that's foolish, isn't it? I should be grateful for what I have: a roof over my head, meaningful work, the chance to be useful." Quinn rose and crossed to stand behind her. She could feel the warmth of him, though he didn't touch her. "It's not foolish to want happiness, Katherine," he said softly. "You deserve that and more." She turned to face him, startled by how close he was. "And what about you, Quinn?" "What do you want?" For a moment she thought he might answer, might bridge the gap between them. But then he stepped back, replacing his hat. "I should get back to work," he said. "The men will be wondering where I've gone." "Of course." Katherine tried to hide her disappointment. "Thank you for checking on me." At the door, he paused. "Sunday dinner is still at 2 o'clock if you'd like to join us." "I'll be there," she promised. After he left, Katherine returned to the window, watching his tall figure until he disappeared over the ridge. She had been too forward, she decided. Quinn was still being neighborly, while she was developing feelings that went far beyond gratitude or friendship. The last thing she wanted was to make him uncomfortable or to jeopardize the welcome she had found in Promise Creek. The schoolhouse was completed by the end of October, a sturdy building with large windows and a small bell tower. The opening ceremony was attended by nearly everyone in the community, from the youngest babies to the oldest grandparents. Katherine stood proudly at the door, welcoming each family and introducing herself to those she hadn't yet met. Quinn arrived with Martha, both dressed in their Sunday best. Quinn's eyes widened slightly when he saw Katherine in her blue dress with the lace collar, the nicest outfit she owned. "You look lovely," he said simply. "Thank you." She smiled at both siblings. "I'm so glad you could come." "Wouldn't have missed it," Martha declared. "This is a big day for Promise Creek." The ceremony was brief but meaningful. Mr. Dawson, who had donated much of the lumber, cut a ribbon across the doorway. The pastor offered a blessing, and Katherine spoke about her vision for the school and her gratitude to the community for their support. As the crowd dispersed to enjoy the potluck dinner that had been arranged, Quinn approached Katherine again. "You did well," he said. "They respect you already." "I hope so. There's so much I want to accomplish here." "You will." He hesitated, then added, "Katherine, there's something I've been meaning to ask you." Her heart quickened. "Yes." Before he could continue, they were interrupted by Mr. Peterson from the general store, who wanted to introduce his daughter to her new teacher. By the time Katherine was free again, Quinn had been pulled into conversation with some of the other ranchers. The school opened the following Monday with 15 students ranging in age from 6 to 16. Katherine threw herself into teaching, developing individual lessons for the different age groups and finding ways to engage even the most reluctant learners. The days were long and challenging, but deeply satisfying. She continued to attend Sunday dinners at the Yates Ranch, enjoying Martha's cooking and the warm atmosphere of their home. Quinn was often quiet during these gatherings, though his eyes followed Katherine when he thought she wasn't looking. Several times, she caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. November brought the first heavy snowfall, transforming the landscape into a pristine white expanse. The school remained open, though attendance dwindled on the coldest days as families kept their children home rather than risk the journey. One such afternoon, as Katherine was preparing to leave the schoolhouse, she found Quinn waiting outside with his horse and wagon. "I thought you might need a ride home," he explained. "The snow's getting deeper." "That's very thoughtful." She allowed him to help her into the wagon and tucked the heavy blanket he offered around her legs. "But won't Martha be expecting you back at the ranch?" I told her I'd be late. He clicked to the horses and they set off through the snow. "How are things at the school?" "Wonderful, actually. Even with the weather, most of the children are making good progress." She told him about Billy Thompson, who had finally learned to read after weeks of struggle, and about Sarah Jensen's talent for mathematics. As they talked, the snow began to fall more heavily, swirling around them in great white gusts. Quinn frowned, urging the horses to a faster pace. "This is turning into a real blizzard," he said, concern evident in his voice. "We should get you home quickly." But the visibility was deteriorating rapidly, and the wind was picking up strength. By the time they reached Katherine's house, they were both half frozen despite the blankets. "Come inside and warm up before you head back," Katherine insisted, unlocking the door with fingers stiff from cold. Quinn hesitated. "I should get the horses to shelter first." "There's the barn behind the house," Katherine reminded him. "It's not large, but it will keep them out of the storm." Quinn nodded and led the team around to the small barn while Katherine hurried inside to build up the fire. When he joined her a few minutes later, his coat and hat were covered in snow. "It's getting worse out there," he reported, removing his outer garments. "The wind's fierce enough to cut right through you." Katherine handed him a cup of hot coffee. "You can't possibly return to your ranch in this. You'll have to wait until the storm passes." Quinn looked uncomfortable. "That wouldn't be proper, Katherine. People would talk." "People will talk more if you freeze to death in a blizzard," she pointed out practically. "Besides, no one will know. We're completely isolated until the snow stops." As if to emphasize her point, a particularly strong gust of wind rattled the windows, sending a shower of snow against the glass. Quinn sighed. "You're right. It would be foolish to attempt the journey now." He moved to the window, peering out at the white wasteland. "I'll sleep in the barn with the horses once the storm eases a bit." "Don't be ridiculous," Katherine said firmly. "There's a perfectly good sofa right here, and it's much too cold in the barn." They settled into an uneasy companionship as the afternoon wore on. Katherine prepared a simple meal from her stores, and they ate by the fire as the storm raged outside. The wind howled down the chimney, making the flames dance and flicker. "Thank you for the meal," Quinn said as he helped her clear the dishes. "You're a good cook. Martha's been teaching me. I never had much opportunity to cook in Boston." She smiled at the memory. "The first time I tried to make biscuits at your ranch, they were hard enough to use as building materials." Quinn laughed, a rich, warm sound that Katherine had heard too rarely. I remember. Martha tried to convince me they were meant to be that way. She was being kind, they were awful. Katherine glanced at him. You have a nice laugh, Quinn, you should use it more often. He sobered slightly. I haven't had much cause for laughter in recent years. Because of your fiancé? The question slipped out before she could stop it. I'm sorry, that's none of my business. No, it's all right. He moved back to the fire, staring into the flames. Yes, Elizabeth's departure was difficult. I thought I had found someone who understood what I was offering, not just a home and security, but a partnership, a life built together. What happened? Katherine asked gently. She arrived in spring when the prairie was in bloom and everything looked promising. But by midsummer, the isolation, the harsh conditions, the endless work, it was too much for her. He sighed. I don't blame her, this life isn't for everyone. No, it isn't, Katherine agreed. But it has its own rewards. Quinn looked at her curiously. You've adapted well, better than most who come from the East. Perhaps because I came with few illusions, I knew it would be difficult. She smiled wryly. Though I admit, I didn't expect quite so many dramatic changes to my plans. Do you regret coming? No. The certainty in her voice surprised even her. I've found purpose here and a community that values me. That's more than I had in Boston. Outside, the storm continued unabated, the wind driving snow against the walls of the small house with increasing fury. Katherine added wood to the fire, grateful for the substantial pile Thomas Wells had left stacked by the hearth. We might be here for some time, Quinn observed. This storm feels like it's settling in for the night. Then we'll make the best of it, Katherine said practically. Would you like to play cards? Thomas had a deck in the drawer there. They played several hands of poker, which Quinn taught her with patient explanations and good-natured teasing when she made mistakes. As the evening progressed, the tension between them eased, replaced by the comfortable familiarity of two people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. You're a quick study, Quinn remarked as Katherine won her third consecutive hand. Are you sure you've never played before? Never, she assured him, laughing at his suspicious expression. But I've always been good with patterns and strategy. Clearly. He gathered the cards, shuffling them with practiced ease. Another round, or shall I admit defeat? Before Katherine could answer, a particularly violent gust of wind hit the house, rattling the windows alarmingly. One of the shutters broke free from its moorings, banging against the side of the house. I should secure that, Quinn said, rising to his feet. Otherwise it might break the glass. Be careful, Katherine cautioned, suddenly anxious at the thought of him venturing outside. Quinn donned his coat and hat, bracing himself before opening the door. The wind immediately filled the room with swirling snow, its force nearly knocking him backwards. Katherine watched anxiously from the doorway as he fought his way to the loose shutter, finally managing to latch it securely. When he returned, he was covered in snow and shivering violently. You're freezing, Katherine exclaimed, helping him remove his coat. Come by the fire immediately. His hands were like ice, and his face was pale beneath its wind-reddened surface. Without thinking, Katherine took his hands between her own, rubbing them briskly to restore circulation. You'll catch your death, she scolded, leading him to the chair closest to the fire. What were you thinking going out in that? That you couldn't afford to lose a window, he replied through chattering teeth. Glass is expensive to replace out here. More expensive than your health. She wrapped a blanket around his shoulders. Sit still and warm up, I'll make some tea. As she busied herself with the kettle, she was acutely aware of Quinn's presence, of the way his eyes followed her movements. When she returned with the steaming cup, he took it gratefully, his fingers brushing against hers in the exchange. Thank you, he said, his voice low. For the tea and for your concern. Anyone would be concerned, she replied, settling into the chair opposite him. It's a terrible night to be outdoors. Not anyone, he countered. You have a kind heart, Katherine. It's one of the things I admire most about you. The sincerity in his voice made her blush. You give me too much credit, I'm just practical. Practical, he repeated with a small smile. There's that word again. Is that really how you see yourself? Isn't it how everyone sees me? The practical schoolteacher making the best of difficult circumstances. That's not how I see you at all. Quinn's blue eyes were intense in the firelight. I see a woman of remarkable courage and resilience, someone who faced devastating news and instead of retreating, found a new path forward. Quinn, she began, uncertain how to respond to such praise. Let me finish, please. He set down his cup, leaning forward slightly. I see someone who brings light wherever she goes, to the classroom, to community gatherings, to Sunday dinners at our table. Someone who makes me remember what it feels like to look forward to tomorrow. Catherine's heart was pounding so loudly she was sure he must hear it. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she had come to recognize as a sign of nervousness. I shouldn't have spoken. It's not my place. Not your place, she echoed, confused. What do you mean you came here to marry Thomas? When that wasn't possible, you found your own way. You've built a life for yourself, independent and self-sufficient. He looked down at his hands. The last thing you need is another complication. Is that what you would be, Quinn? A complication? His eyes met hers, vulnerability evident in their depths. Wouldn't I? You've only been here a few months. You're still adjusting to a new life, a new role in the community. That's true, she acknowledged, but you're forgetting something important. What's that? I'm not just practical, I also know my own mind. She gathered her courage. And my heart tells me that you are not a complication, Quinn Yates. You're the reason I've been able to find my footing here. Your kindness, your support, your... She hesitated, then continued, your friendship has meant everything to me. Quinn's expression softened. Is that what we have, Katherine? Friendship? We have that, yes. She took a deep breath. But I think we might have something more if we were both willing to acknowledge it. For a long moment, Quinn simply looked at her, his face a study in conflicting emotions. Then, slowly, he rose from his chair and crossed the small distance between them. Kneeling before her, he took her hands in his. I've been fighting this since the day you arrived, he admitted. It seemed wrong, somehow, to have these feelings for a woman who had come to marry my friend. I understand, Katherine said softly. I've felt the same confusion, but Thomas is gone, Quinn, and while I regret that I never had the chance to know him, I can't regret the path that led me here, to Promise Creek, to teaching. She squeezed his hands. To you. Quinn raised one hand to cup her cheek, his touch gentle. May I kiss you, Katherine? She nodded, her heart racing as he leaned in, his lips meeting hers in a tender, questioning kiss. It was brief, almost tentative, but it sent warmth spreading through her entire body. When they parted, Quinn searched her face. I don't want to rush you, he said. You've had so many changes in such a short time. You're not rushing me, she assured him. If anything, I've been impatient, waiting for you to see what was right in front of you. He laughed softly. And here, I thought I was being too obvious with my feelings. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside the small house, a different kind of warmth was building, one that had nothing to do with the fire crackling in the hearth. They talked late into the night, sharing stories of their pasts and dreams for the future. Quinn spoke of his desire to expand his ranch, to breed horses as well as cattle. Katherine described her vision for the school, how she hoped to add a library and perhaps even classes for adults who wanted to improve their reading skills. We make a good team, Quinn observed as they finally prepared for sleep, he on the sofa and she in the bedroom. Your vision and my practicality. I thought I was the practical one, Katherine teased. You're practical about some things, he conceded with a smile, but you dream bigger than anyone I know. It's inspiring. The storm broke sometime in the night, and morning dawned clear and blindingly white. Quinn left early to check on his horses and then to return to his ranch, where Martha would be worried by his absence. I'll come back tomorrow, he promised, standing at the door. If the roads are passable, I'll be here, Katherine replied, reluctant to see him go. Be careful, Quinn. He kissed her once more, lingering a moment longer than necessary. This changes everything, you know, he murmured against her hair. For the better, I hope, she responded, definitely for the better. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. School continued, with Katherine dividing her time between teaching and helping with preparations for the community's Christmas celebration. Quinn visited regularly, sometimes staying for dinner, sometimes just stopping by briefly on his way to or from town. Their courtship was conducted primarily in public at church gatherings, community events, or under Martha's watchful but approving eye at Sunday dinners. Occasionally, they would find moments alone, stealing kisses by the schoolhouse door or talking late into the evening at Katherine's home, always with propriety in mind. As Christmas approached, Quinn seemed increasingly distracted. He would fall into long silences during their conversations, only to apologize and change the subject when Katherine questioned him. She began to worry that he was having second thoughts about their relationship. "Is everything all right?" she finally asked one evening as they sat by her fire. "You seem troubled lately," Quinn sighed. "I'm sorry, I've had a lot on my mind. Anything you'd like to share?" He hesitated, then reached for her hand. "Katherine, I need to ask you something important," her heart stuttered. "Yes." "When you came west, you were seeking security, a home, a partner in life." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "You found the first two on your own through your own strength and determination. And the third," she prompted when he paused, "the third is what I'm offering now." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small gold ring. "This was my mother's. I'd like it to be yours if you'll have me as your husband." Katherine stared at the ring, then at Quinn's earnest face. "Are you certain? It hasn't been very long." "I've never been more certain of anything," he said firmly. "I love you, Katherine Rowland. I think I have since the moment you stepped down from that stagecoach, looking so brave and so lost all at once." Tears filled her eyes. "I love you too, Quinn, but what about my teaching?" "And this house, Thomas's house? You'll continue teaching, of course. The school needs you." Quinn squeezed her hand. "As for this house, that's your decision. We could live here or at my ranch or build something new together. What matters is that we'd be facing whatever comes next as partners." "Partners?" she repeated, smiling through her tears. "That's what I've always wanted." "Is that a yes?" "Yes," she said firmly. "Yes, Quinn Yates, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into his arms for a kiss that held all the promise of their future together. They were married on New Year's Day, 1879, in the small church in Promise Creek. The entire community turned out for the celebration, filling the church to capacity despite the bitter cold. Martha stood as Katherine's witness, beaming with approval as her brother and his bride exchanged vows. After much discussion, they had decided to make their home at the Yates Ranch, which had more space and was better established. Katherine would continue teaching at the school, riding back and forth each day unless the weather was too severe. What about Thomas's property? Martha had asked when they announced their decision. "We're going to donate it for the school's expansion," Katherine explained. "A library, perhaps, or housing for future teachers." "Tom would have liked that," Quinn added. Education meant a lot to him. Their wedding night was spent at the Yates Ranch, the rest of the household tactfully retiring early to give the newlyweds privacy. As they lay together in the large bedroom that would now be theirs, Katherine marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment. "What are you thinking?" Quinn asked, propping himself up on one elbow to gaze at her. "That life takes the most unexpected turns," she replied, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw. "I came west to marry a stranger and found myself widowed before I was a bride." "And then you met another stranger," Quinn continued the thought, capturing her hand and kissing her palm. "Who became a friend," she added, "and then so much more. And now a husband." He smiled, the happiness in his eyes warming her heart. "For as long as we both shall live." "I like the sound of that," Katherine murmured as he bent to kiss her once more. Spring came early that year, bringing with it new growth and fresh possibilities. Katherine's school flourished, attracting students from farther afield as its reputation for excellence spread. Quinn's ranch prospered as well, his careful management and forward-thinking approaches yielding greater profits than previous years. On a warm April evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Katherine shared her latest news. Dr. Wilson confirmed it today, she said, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. We're going to have a baby, Quinn, in late October. Quinn's face transformed with wonder. A baby, are you certain? The doctor is, and I've suspected for a few weeks now. She smiled at his amazement. Are you pleased? Pleased, Katherine, He shook his head, words failing him, and instead gathered her into his arms. I love you so much, he murmured against her hair. Both of you. In the years that followed, the Yates family grew and thrived. Their first child, a daughter they named Hope, was born in the autumn of 1879. A son, Daniel, followed 2 years later, and another daughter, Mary, 2 years after that. Katherine continued teaching until each pregnancy, returning once the babies were old enough to be cared for by Martha or one of the local girls hired to help with the household. The school expanded, just as they had planned, with Thomas Wells' former property converted into a library and additional classroom space. Promise Creek grew as well, attracting new settlers drawn by the fertile land and the strong community that had developed around the school and church. On the 5th anniversary of their marriage, Quinn surprised Katherine with a trip back east to visit her old friends in Boston. It was her first return since leaving, and while she enjoyed showing Quinn the city of her birth, she found herself eager to return to Wyoming. I never thought I'd feel this way, she confessed as their train crossed into Wyoming territory, but I'm homesick for the prairie. It gets into your blood, Quinn agreed, squeezing her hand. The open spaces, the big sky, it's part of us now. No, Katherine corrected gently. Home isn't the place, it's the people. She leaned her head on his shoulder. It's you and the children and Martha and our friends. That's what I missed most. Quinn kissed the top of her head. When you stepped off that stagecoach and I said you'd ride home with me, I had no idea how true those words would become. Katherine smiled, thinking of the long, unexpected journey that had led her to this happiness. She had come west seeking security and found love instead, a love born from kindness and grown through shared hardships and joys. That was the day my life truly began, she said softly, even though I didn't know it yet. As the train carried them westward, toward home and family and all that they had built together, Katherine reflected on the curious twist of fate that had brought her to Promise Creek as a mail-order bride for one man, only to find her true partner in another. Thomas Wells' death had seemed a tragedy at the time, but without it, she would never have known this life, this love, this profound contentment. In the end, she had found exactly what she'd been seeking when she left Boston, and so much more than she had dared to hope for. A home. A purpose. A love to last a lifetime. And it had all begun with those simple words on that dusty autumn day. Then you'll ride home with me.